Welcome back to Julie's Village. I'm glad you're here. This episode is going to continue with the next eligibility category under which a student can qualify for special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I'm once again going to take most of my information from the Idaho Special Education Manual, and while criteria can vary from state to state, overall they're pretty similar. This next and final category is visual impairment, including blindness. Under this category, a team would be considering, is a blindness present or is there a visual impairment? A student is considered having partial sight if vision can be used as an educational channel if materials are adapted. If even with an adaptation to materials, this a student can't access vision or use vision as a way to access education, then this would be that then the student would be qualified or considered as having blindness. So under this category, a team needs to have documented that there needs to be a documented condition from a qualified professional. But under this category, there are several subcategories under which a student could qualify. So the first one is just blindness itself. In order for a student to be considered as having blindness, their vision in their better eye, their visual acuity needs to be 2200 or less. If or their visual field, the restriction to the visual field needs to be 20 degrees or less, again in that better eye. So if that criteria is met, then they would be considered as having blindness. The next one is visual impairment. That next area would be visual impairment. So visual impairment would be if a student has a visual acuity in the better eye of 20/70 or less, or if the field of restriction or the visual field restriction is 70 degrees. So if a student has better than 2200 but less than 20/70 visual acuity, they would qualify as a visual impairment. If they have less than 70 degree, or if their visual field restriction is less than 70 degrees but more than 20 degrees, then they again would be considered as having a visual impairment. The next area that a team could consider is an eye condition. There are three specific examples given, but these aren't the only conditions that would apply. These are just three more common conditions that can occur with a visual impairment. The first is oculomotor apraxia. That is where the eyes are not able to make voluntary, rapid, or fast eye movements. That's not able to initiate that. That's pretty important when you're trying to read things like text in front of you, things up on the board, math problems presented to you. You need that fast eye movement to be able to take in that information. The next eye condition is a cortical visual impairment. That is where there is nothing wrong with the eye itself, but that there is some kind of impairment that is impacting the brain's ability to take in the information from the eye. And then the last one specifically mentioned is a convergence insufficiency, and that is where the eyes are not working together, especially looking at things, objects that are near or close up. Oftentimes there's one eye, at least one eye that turns outward. The next area is a progressive loss of vision. This occurs if a student is projected as having they're already losing vision and they're projected to continue to lose vision, then a team might need to consider special education services to help teach strategies and other ways for a student to take in that educational information as they lose their vision. Then that last area, the fifth area, is a functional vision loss, where acuity or visual alone may not meet the criteria that I talked about earlier for blindness or for a visual impairment, but that there is something going on that is impacting that vision. Some examples might be that there's something happening, not necessarily with that peripheral vision, but something is happening with what maybe something's causing them to have um, difficulty with other other aspects of vision. For example, some students might experience eye conditions where their eyes swell and they get a lot of floaties in front of their eyes that impacts their vision, or different situations like that. So if a team has this documented information from a qualified professional, then as they consider that information, they take it all in, they are going to go ahead and conduct further assessments to see how this is impacting that student specifically. They are going to look and see how it's impacting their academics and their ability to carry out routines independently. How is it impacting social relationships? All of those things are going to be taken into consideration. And the team is then going to determine, based off of this diagnosis and based off of the information that they've gathered, are there any adverse impacts? If there are adverse impacts that can just be met by accommodations, a 504 plan would be appropriate. If the team sees that a student's needs cannot just be met by these accommodations, that they do need to provide some kind of specialized instruction. Again, this might be tailored specifically towards strategies for taking in information. For instance, if a student needs to be taught Braille, or they need to be taught strategies for moving around their environment, then the team, if that is seen as being a need, then the team would say, yes, they do need specially designed instruction. So if all of those pieces are there, the team sees that yes, there is some form of visual impairment or blindness, there is an adverse impact, and there is a need for specially designed instruction, then the student would qualify for special education services under the category of visual impairment, including blindness. If you have any specific information about visual impairment or blindness, I invite you to leave that in the comments. If you have questions about this eligibility category, or any other questions or topics that you would like to see discussed in future episodes, or people that you would like to see interviewed in future episodes, I invite you to leave that in the comments as well. If this information is helpful to you, I invite you to like, share, subscribe. That helps make this more accessible to others. Thank you so much for letting me be part of your village.